Sacred geometry is the blueprint of creation and the genesis of all form. It is an ancient science that explores and explains the energy patterns that create and unify all things and reveals the precise way that energy of creation organizes itself. On every scale, every natural pattern of growth or movement conforms inevitably to one or more geometric shapes. As you enter the world of sacred geometry, you begin to see as never before the wonderfully patterned beauty of creation. Sacred geometry is defined as opening the heart and mind to conscious evolution through geometric models. It is the study of geometric forms and the metaphorical relationships to transitions of mind, emotions, and spirit. The transition of the human spirit can be seen in the transition of one geometric form to another through its own evolvement, moving into higher and higher patterns. This is the way of the heart as well. The spiral is the most obvious symbol of this evolution of consciousness. Sacred geometric forms are not stagnant. They are in constant flux, evolving or devolving from one geometric form to another at their own speed or vibratory frequency. We can, through observing and studying sacred geometric form, tune ourselves into that vibration and resonate with that frequency of the sacred geometry to cause insights and revelations within our own four body systems in sacred harmony. That is why certain sacred geometric forms call out to us from an indefinable place within our own being. We are resonating with that geometry, and it is bringing balance and upliftment as we harmonize with it. The ancients believed that the experience of sacred geometry was essential to the education of the soul. They knew that these patterns and codes are symbolic of our own inner realm and the subtle structure of awareness. To them, the sacred had particular significance involving consciousness and the profound mystery of awareness, the ultimate sacred wonder. Sacred geometry takes on a whole other level of significance when grounded in the experience of self-awareness. The molecules of our DNA, the cornea of our eyes, snowflakes, pine cones, flower petals, diamond crystals, the branching of the trees, a nautilus shell, the stars we spin around, the galaxy we spiral within, the air we breathe, and all life forms as we know them emerge out of timeless geometric codes. Viewing and contemplating these codes allow us to gaze directly at the lines on the face of deep wisdom and offer a glimpse to the inner workings of the universal mind and the universe itself. John Melchizedek maintains that sacred geometry started when spirit made its first projection into the void and created the first octahedron around itself. The void is infinite, nothing in it, and these forms being created are also nothing. They're just imaginary lines created out of consciousness. This gives you an idea of what reality is, nothing. The Hindus called reality Maya, which means illusion. Spirit can sit in the middle of its creation for a long time, but eventually it will make a decision to do something. To recreate the process, mystery school students were given special instructions to reenact the same motions that Spirit took. These two simple instructions are all that's required to complete and create everything in the entire universe. Remember that Spirit is now sitting in a sphere. The instructions are to move that which is newly created, then project another sphere exactly like the first. That does something very special and unique. This is an absolutely foolproof system for creating reality. You cannot make a mistake no matter what you do. All you do is move that which is newly created and project another sphere the same size as the first one. In this system, since nothing exists except the bubble and the void, and inside the bubble is the same as the outside, the only thing that's new or different is the membrane itself, the surface of the sphere. So consciousness decides to go to the surface. It makes no difference whether it goes on the surface or it can go anywhere. It doesn't make any difference how it gets there either. Whether it goes in a straight line or in curves or spirals or explores out and seeks through space in between, it can be really creative. It doesn't make any difference. But somehow or another it will end up on the surface of the sphere. For purposes of this example, we'll say that Spirit went up to the top, just to be symmetrical and easier to deal with. Anyway, Spirit, the single little eye, lands on the surface. It has just made the first motion in Genesis, and the Spirit of God moved on the face of the waters. And the very next thing was, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. At this point, Spirit only knows how to do one thing. Actually, it knows how to do two things, but the end result is one. It knows, 1, how to project the little octahedron and create a sphere, 2, how to move to what's newly created. That's it. Very simple reality. So once it arrives on the surface, it makes another octahedron, spins it around on 3 axes, and forms another sphere identical to the size of the first one. It's identical in size because its ability to project into the void is the same. Nothing has changed in that respect, so it creates a second sphere exactly the same size as the first. When it does that, it has done something in terms of sacred geometry is very special. It has formed a vesica Pisces at the intersection of the two spheres. Have you ever seen two soap bubbles sticking together? When two soap bubbles intersect, a line or circle goes around their linkage. If you're looking at the two bubbles from the side, the newly formed section would look like a line. But if you're looking down at the bubbles from on the top, you would see a newly created formed circumference inside the larger spheres. The vesica Pisces circumference is symmetrical to and smaller than the circumference of the larger spheres. In other words, it would appear from the side like a straight line and from the top like a circle. Even though the vesica Pisces is usually a two-dimensional like a coin, its three-dimensional aspect is just as valid. If you were to take it out of the middle of the two spheres, it would look similar to a football. I cannot prove this to you right now, but later in the book I'll be able to prove the image is light. It's the geometric image through which light is created. It's the geometric image through which your eyes were created, which receive light. Besides light, it's also the image of patterns that are connected to your emotions and many other aspects of life. This is the basic geometry of the electromagnetic field. It's too simple to understand here. I have to wait until things get more complex, then I can explain it. I'll show you the first motion of Genesis creates the pattern that is light. That's why God said, "Let there be light." He couldn't say that until he projected the second sphere and made the vesica Pisces. When spirit is in the center of the second sphere and looking down at the vesica Pisces, it's looking upon the newly formed circle, the circle of the vesica Pisces. This circle is the only thing that's new, and the spirit's instructions are to go on to what's newly created. It doesn't make any difference whether it goes on the new circle. It cannot make a mistake. It just moves to somewhere on that circle and projects a new sphere. No matter where spirit lands, we can rotate the sphere to look like this drawing. In every motion of Genesis, vast amounts of knowledge came out. The first creation produced the sphere. The first motion, day, produced the vesica Pisces, which is the basis of light. The second motion, day, produced, in interpreting the relationship between the three spheres, the basic geometries of the star tetrahedron, which you will soon see is one of the most important shapes for life. We're not going to get into all the information that was formed at this time, but each time a new sphere was formed, more and more information unfolds and more creative patterns become visible. After the first and second motions have taken place, from anywhere on the sphere to anywhere on the circle, no matter how spirit moved, no matter where it went on the circle or sphere, it will always be perfect. It will begin to move exactly on the equator of the original sphere. There are an infinite number of equators on that sphere, but it will choose the perfect one. After that pattern is created, there's only one instruction left to follow, forever. The only other action to be taken until the end of time is always to move the innermost circle point and project another sphere. For the sake of clarity, let's define what we mean by the innermost circle point. In this case, there are three innermost circle points. If your eye was to trace the outside perimeter of this pattern, it would come to three places that are closest. They're at the closest places to center. It is the closest places to center that we are calling the innermost circle point. In the case of the Genesis pattern, that is the movement the spirit is creating, there are 6 innermost circle points. So with this in mind, spirit starts moving exactly around the equator of the original or central sphere. When it has traversed the full 360 degrees and reaches the point at which it has started, which will be 6 points of movement, it begins to follow its second impulse, or instruction for the mystery school students. Move to the innermost circle points, which are now located on the circumference of the original sphere where the two vesica Pisces intersect. Simply put, they are the points as close as possible to the outside of the pattern. That continual movement begins to form a vortex. This vortex creates different types of three-dimensional forms, one after another, which are the building blocks or blueprints of the entire reality. Once spirit has created the third sphere, it now moves to the innermost circle point and projects another sphere. There is information here, but it is too complex to discuss at this time. This is very interesting. It is the fourth motion or day. It says in many Bibles in the world that on the fourth day of Genesis, exactly 1/2 of creation was complete. Starting from the first motion, exactly 1/2 of the circle was formed. We have moved exactly 180 degrees from the point of the first motion. This is the 5th day of Genesis. More information. And then on the 6th day, a geometric miracle takes place. The last circle forms a complete 6-petaled flower. This is why in many of the earlier Bibles they stated, "In the beginning there were 6." Our Bible now says that creation was formed in 6 days, and this fits exactly. This is the pattern of Genesis. so we refer to it as the Genesis pattern. It's the beginning of creation of this universe we live in. These original movements of spirit are really important. Let's take a look at the Genesis pattern. If you look at a math book, the Genesis pattern has a minimal amount of lines that can be drawn on a flat surface to delineate the three-dimensional form called a torus. A torus is formed when you rotate the Genesis pattern around on its central axis, creating a shape that looks like a donut, but the hole in the middle is infinitely small. A torus, here called torus tube because the particular one is shaped like an inner tube, is unique in its ability to fold in on itself, turning either inward or outward. No other shape in existence can do this or anything similar. A torus is the first shape that comes out of the completed Genesis pattern and is absolutely unique among all other forms in existence. It was Arthur Young who discovered that there are 7 regions on this shape, which are collectively called the 7-color map. You can pick up in almost any mathematics book, and if you go to the Torus, it will talk about the 7-color map. There are 7 regions, all the same size, that will exactly fit in the torus tube with nothing left over. Just like on the Genesis pattern, 6 circles going around the 7th, central one, take up an entire surface. It's perfect, flawless. In sacred geometry, there's something called ratcheting. You take a circle or line and ratchet it, like when you take a ratchet tool in car mechanics and use it to rotate it to something a certain distance. For instance, imagine 2 Genesis patterns superimposed on each other. One pattern is fixed. If you rotate the other pattern 30 degrees, you would have 12 spheres around the central one. It would look like this, in 2 dimensions. In 3 dimensions, it would look like a torus tube. If you connect all the possible lines in the middle, you get this pattern. The innermost circles show the first 6 days of Genesis. Once the consciousness projects the first 7 spheres and completes the Genesis pattern, it then continues moving in a rotational pattern from each consecutive innermost place until it completes the second vortex motion as seen by the outermost circles. That motion in turn completes the 3-dimensional shape you can hold in your hand, which looks like this. So what? Who cares? Well, the ancients did, because they were concerned with creation, life, and death. They called this cluster of spheres the egg of life. I'll show you how the egg of life is the morphogenetic structure that created your body. Your entire physical existence is dependent on this egg of life structure. Everything about you was created with the egg of life form, right down to the colors of your eyes, the shape of your nose, how long your fingernails are, and everything else. It's all based on this one form. When you extrapolate the vortex one more time, you get this pattern, which should be recognizable to most of you watching this video. This is the fruit of life pattern. If you superimpose straight lines over this in all 13 ways, you'll come up with 13 patterns that, along with the egg of life and the torus, create everything in existence. The egg of life, the torus, and this fruit of life, a total of 3 patterns, create everything in existence without exception. Anyone who has studied sacred geometry or even regular geometry knows that there are 5 unique shapes, and they are crucial to understanding both sacred and regular geometry. They're called the Platonic solids. A Platonic solid has certain characteristics by definition. First of all, its faces are all the same size. For instance, a cube, the most well-known of the Platonic solids, has a square on every face, so its faces are all the same size. Second, the edges of a Platonic solid are always the same length. All edges of a cube are the same length. Third, it has only one size of interior angles between faces. In the case of a cube, this angle is 90 degrees, and fourth, if a Platonic solid is put inside a sphere of the right size, all points will touch the surface of the sphere. With that definition, there are only 4 shapes besides the cube that all have these characteristics. Second, V is the tetrahedron. Tetra means 4. A polyhedron that has 4 faces, all equilateral triangles, 1 edge length and 1 angle, and all points touch the surface of a sphere. The other simple one is an octahedron, octa means 8, whose 8 faces are equilateral triangles of the same size, edge, length, and angle, and all points touch the surface of a sphere. The other 2 Platonic solids are a little more complicated. One is called an icosahedron, which means it has 20 faces, made of equilateral triangles with the same edge, length, and angle, and all points touch the surface of the sphere. The last one is called a pentagonal dodecahedron, dodeca is 12, whose faces are 12 pentagons, 5 sides, with the same edge length and same angle, whose points all touch the surface of the sphere. If you're an engineer or an architect, you have studied these 5 shapes in college, at least cursorily, because they're the basis of structures. These 6 shapes were considered by ancient alchemists and great souls like Pythagoras, the father of Greece, to have an elemental aspect to them. The tetrahedron was considered fire, the cube was earth, the octahedron was air, the icosahedron was water, and the dodecahedron was ether. Prana, or tachyon energy, they're all the same thing. They extend everywhere and are accessible at every point in time, space, dimension. This is the great secret of zero-point technology. And the sphere is voidness. These 6 elements are the building blocks of the universe. They create the qualities of the universe. In alchemy, they usually talk only about fire, earth, air, and water. They seldom discuss ether or prana because it's so sacred. In the Pythagorean school, if you even uttered the word dodecahedron outside the school, they would kill you on the spot. That's how sacred the shape was. They wouldn't even discuss it. 200 years later, when Plato was alive, he would discuss it only very carefully. Why? Because the dodecahedron is near the outer edge in your energy field and is the highest form of consciousness. When you get to the 55-foot limit of your energy field, it's a sphere. But the very next shape outside the sphere is the dodecahedron. Actually, the dodecahedron-icosahedral relationship. In addition, we live in a big dodecahedron that contains the universe. When your mind reaches out to the end of space, and there is an end, there's a dodecahedron enclosed in a sphere. I can say this because the human body is a hologram of the universe and contains the same principles. The 12 constellation of the zodiac fits inside of it. The dodecahedron is the termination point of the geometries, and it's very important. On a microscopic level, the dodecahedron and icosahedron are the relational parameters of DNA, the blueprint of all life. You can relate the 3 columns in this figure to the tree of life and the 3 primary energies of the universe: male on the left, female on the right, and child in the center. Or if you go right down to the fabric of the universe, you have the proton on the left, the electron on the right, and the neutron in the center. This central column, which is the creating one, is the child. Remember, we went from an octahedron to a sphere to begin the process out of the void. It is the beginning of the process of creation, and it is found in the child, or central column. The left column, holding the tetrahedron and the cube, is the male component of consciousness, the left side of the brain. The faces of these polygons are triangles or squares. The center column is called the corpus callosum, which links the left and right sides. The right column, holding the dodecahedron and icosahedron, is the female component of consciousness, the right side of the brain, and the polygon faces that are made up of triangles and pentagons. Thus, the polygons on the left have 3 and 4-sided faces, and the shapes on the right have 3 and 5-sided faces. In terms of the Earth's consciousness, the right column is the missing component. We have created the male left side of Earth's consciousness, and what we are doing now is completing the female component for wholeness and balance. The right side is also associated with Christ or unity consciousness. The dodecahedron is the basic form of the Christ consciousness grid around the Earth.
In Dan Winter's book, Heart Man, the DNA molecule is shown to be constructed by a dual relationship of dodecahedron and icosahedron. One can also see the DNA molecule as a rotating cube. When you rotate a cube through 72 degrees in a particular pattern, it makes an icosahedron, which in turn is the dual with the dodecahedron. So there is a reciprocal pattern going up DNA strands. The icosahedron, then the dodecahedron, then the icosahedron, continuing back and forth. This rotation through the cube creates the DNA molecule. It has been determined that this is the exact sacred geometry behind DNA, although there may be further hidden relationships.
This right here is your DNA. This at the top is your DNA from a top-down view. These geometric shapes that you see is what we call sacred geometry. Sacred geometry is an ancient study that explains energy patterns, like this turtle right here. If you look to the right, what you see here is a sand plate that's connected to some type of instrument that can send out frequency. Now let's just say the instrument is a piano, and when I hit one of the notes on the piano, it shifts the sand into these specific geometric shapes. This is called cymatics, the study of visible sound. You can also do this with liquids. Now here's a picture of cymatics in water, top-down view of DNA, and church windows. Notice they are almost identical. Now, how many times have you drove past a church window like this and wondered how the fuck did they come up with that design? They didn't. It's in your DNA. Now, here's something very interesting. Everything has a resonant frequency, which basically means everything has its own frequency. Now, a lady did an experiment where she set up a mic in the church like this and recorded the silence. She then set up speakers to play that silence so that it would go back into the mic and keep creating a louder and louder and louder sound, to the point to where it was strong enough to show up cymatically. Now, when she played that sound through water, it created these shapes cymatically. And to her surprise, the same shape the sound of the church was making was what the shapes of the windows inside the church looked like. There's only one group of people I know who can build at that level. But anyway, now remember, buildings have their own resonant frequency, which means that when you're in the building, your body is being interacted with those frequencies. So if your body is made of 60 to 80% water, and this is what water looks like when it's vibrating, that means whatever shape is made by the sound of the church is the shape that your DNA is taking form of. I believe these cathedrals are designed to create healing frequencies to make you feel good when you're inside of the church. This could be part of the reason why people feel good when they enter a church, not realizing the church is emitting its own healing frequency in alignment with the instruments that are being played by uplifting music scales.
General Melchizedek maintains that this 72-degree angle rotating in our DNA connects to the blueprint/purpose of the White Guild. As many of you may know, 72 orders are associated with this great wide brotherhood. Many people speak of the 72 orders of angels, and the Hebrews speak of the 72 names of God. The reason for 72 has to do with the way the Platonic solids are constructed, which is also related to the Christ consciousness grid around the earth. If you take two tetrahedrons and superimpose them, though in different positions, you get a star tetrahedron, which from a different view is nothing but a cube. You can see how they're interrelated. In a similar manner, you can put 5 tetrahedrons together and make an icosahedral cap. If you make 12 icosahedral caps and put one on each face of the dodecahedron, it would require 5 times 10 or 60 tetrahedrons to create a dodecahedron. It would be a stellated dodecahedron because the point comes out of the center of each face. Its dual is the 12 points in the center of each face of the dodecahedron, which forms an icosahedron. The 60 tetrahedrons plus the 12 of the centers equals 72, again the number of orders associated with the Great Wide Brotherhood. The Brotherhood actually functions through the physical relationships of this stellated dodecahedron icosahedral form, which is the basis of the Christ consciousness grid around the world. In other words, the Brotherhood is attempting to bring out the consciousness of the planet's right brain.
Here are some pictures of the Platonic solids shown up in natural crystal formation.
At the beginning of the video he shows a CD or a disc. He immediately draws the geometric shape of an oblate spheroid. We can see how he separates the oblate spheroid with a disc that has a hole in the center. Then, below he draws a circle with a swastika inside and immediately paints it completely black. From this black circle rays come out and 3 rays pass through the hole in the center. Below he writes, "Still." one of the possible meanings of this black circle may be the black sun. He draws reliefs on the edge of the hole and writes North Pole. And above this hole inside what would be the celestial vault he draws a star, the polar star or Polaris. He marks 2 points and connects them in a circle and writes equator. He draws 2 lines that go down from the polar star to the 2 points. The lines form a triangle. He highlights 2 of the rays coming out of the black sun and also forms a triangle, but vice versa. And he writes, as above so below. It's one of the 7 principles of Hermes Trismegistus. It appears on the Emerald Tablet and then in the Kabbalion. He erases the intersections and draws the sun and moon. And he makes a gesture of rotation. He draws 2 arrows to show the distance of the moon and the sun. Both are 3,300 miles or 5,310 kilometers away. Then he measures the diameter of the sun and moon, being the same with a diameter of 32 miles or 51 kilometers. He draws continents on the surface and on the other side as well. He points both sides and writes, same. Below he writes summer land. He draws rays coming out of the black sun and writes, Northern Lights. The center of the drawing is equal to the Mason symbol, which is a square and a compass. He points out the ray coming out of the black sun toward the moon, and then he erases the face of the moon. He makes signs explaining that the sun doesn't light up the moon. Who does it is the black sun.
Everything is torus fields. There's nothing but torus fields. There's majestic big ones. There's minuscule ones which we call atoms. Our body is made of atoms, and those atoms are little donuts, little torus fields, torus fields, torus fields, torus fields, torus fields, torus fields, torus fields. The Earth is in the middle. It's the middle garden. The center here is the dielectric inertial plane, and so are the 7 planets below us. And then above us you have 7 planets, Druvaloka, the pole star, where Brahma sits, and he has created this world, this cosmos, this universe. The outside of the torus field, this is what we call the firmament. So when we see those fixed stars precessing, it's crystalline in structure. This is moving and turning. It's a big, massive torus field. This is the universe, a bubble, a sphere. And inside this sphere, you know, well, in that system we saw from the Hare Krishnas, 15 planets. Middle one here, 7 below, 7 above, and then 3 layers of firmament, which they call primum mobile. 3 layers, 3 layers, 3 layers. And so this is where we live. We live in a big apple. Have you heard the expression, this is like an apple of Apollo, a massive torus, massive, massive, massive torus, massive torus. And so we live inside the big apple. That's why, hence the expression, the big apple. Everything is apples. In the center of the apple is the core, the heart, the curve, the cardiac, the heart. And so, welcome to the real world. You live on here, and when the moon turns around, this central tree, this is called Yggdrasil, the hyperboloid center of our Earth, the North Pole, North Pole, North Pole, North Pole. The hyperboloid center South Pole. When you go further beyond, there are other lands beyond, other lands, other lands, other lands, other lands beyond, beyond. It's a Torus field inside of a Torus field, inside of a Torus field. And everything is Toruses. Everything is Toruses. There's nothing but Torus. Nothing else exists. Nothing else exists.